Hi folks, as you can see I have my formal wear on, but again, this is an emergency video I need to make after reading the discussion forum comments and posts on the chapter on inflation. So here's the thing, right? I mean, the question asks you to sort of respond to the argument that raising the minimum wage would lead to inflation and whether that's the same or different from higher gas prices' relationship with inflation. And almost everyone, with a few exceptions, but almost everyone sort of took the bait, right? And they took the bait meaning that you assumed that, in fact, an increase in minimum wage or an increase in gas prices cause inflation. And then you went on to sort of try to distinguish them in ways that I think just aren't relevant. Just a footnote here, by the way. When gas prices go up, once again, it's not that people buy the same amount of gas. They do buy less gas when the price goes up. They don't buy a lot less, they buy a little less, but they do buy less. And so when you say things like, well, people just keep buying gas no matter what the price is, that's not true. That denies that the demand curve is downward sloping. And it is. We know that from empirical investigation and evidence. Remember the other video lecture about the idea of the dimmer switch. We don't just on and off decisions when prices change. We slide up and down. Price changes, we change our behavior a little bit, maybe a little bit more, but we don't just stop or go. That's a side point. Let me get to the main point here. Increases in minimum wage or an increase in gas price cannot cause inflation. They can't. Period. End of its sentence. There's only one thing that causes inflation. Look at the slide. I think it's slide 26 in chapter 12, and you'll see the cause of inflation. Inflation is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon. That's Milton Friedman, and as your book says, it's one of the most important truths in macroeconomics. The only thing that can cause inflation is an excess supply of money. Over time, right? I mean, there's other factors in the short run that can bump prices across the board just a little bit. But the only way to get inflation, a sustained increase in the average level of prices, is through an increase in the money supply. Period. End of sentence. Done. Over. Okay? If you increase the minimum wage, right? Some of you want to say, well, you increase the minimum wage, people have more money to spend, that drives up prices. You're forgetting two important things there. First of all, an increase in the minimum wage doesn't mean that everyone keeps their job, right? From the firm's perspective, if they have to pay workers more, they may lay off or fire some workers. So the total expenditures on payroll that the firm makes may actually go down as a result of an increase in the minimum wage, in which case, even if your point about spending were true, which it's not, right, it would be wrong in this case as the spending would actually go down. All right? Follow me? So that's the first thing. Second thing is, even if it's true that the firm's payroll goes up, that is, workers have more money to spend, if the firm spends more on payroll, it's spending less on other things. The other things that they used to buy and aren't buying anymore, like maybe capital machinery or other sorts of things, those prices will fall as a result of spending more elsewhere. Right? MV equals PY tells us that there's M and V are what determine the amount of spending that takes place. Increasing the minimum wage does not affect M, and it probably doesn't affect V. At least not for everybody. Some people may spend more, but other people will spend less. M hasn't changed. Paying people more money does not increase the money supply, right? It gives some people more money and other people less, right? Someone's paying it. The firms are paying it. So when you're thinking about that minimum wage example, no, minimum wage cannot cause inflation. It causes some prices to go up and some prices to go down, but the average level will not increase. The only way you can increase the average level of prices, P, is if one of those other factors, M, V, or Y, changes, and changes in a sustained way. And minimum wage doesn't do anything to affect those in any sustained, significant way. If anything, it causes, like I said, it can cause a short-run change in velocity. It might cause a long-run change in Y, but none of those things are going to affect, those things are not going to cause that sustained increase in the average level of prices. Say, gas prices, same thing, just slightly different. Who's doing the spending? If gas prices go up, people buy a little bit less gas, quantity demanded falls. They may end up spending in the short run more on gasoline than they did before the price went up. But if you and I and other households spend more on gasoline, we're spending less on other things. Gas prices go up. Maybe the price of some goods that depend on gas prices go up, but other prices go down because while we're spending more on those things, having to spend more on those things, we're spending less on other things. The only way you can get inflation, that is an increase in the average level of prices across the board, is by an increase in the flow of spending. That's M or V, right? We assume that V is relatively stable over time, and it is. We know that to be an empirical historical fact. It's relatively stable over time. The thing that changes is M, and there's only one institution that can change the money supply. That's the central bank. In the case of the United States, the Federal Reserve. The only thing that causes inflation, once again, is an increase in excess in the money supply. Period. End of sentence. Milton Friedman. Inflation is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon. So don't fall for this trap. Increases in gas prices or increases in minimum wage are not inflation. We see this all the time in the media. When a price of some good, usually gas, but other things too, price of some good goes up, media calls it inflation. No, it's not inflation. If a hurricane hits and destroys refineries and gas is more expensive, that's not inflation. That's real scarcity. Gas is more scarce. The price of gas should go up. That's not inflation. That's just a change in relative prices. Same with minimum wage. Increase the price of labor, change in relative prices, not inflation. So a good answer for this question would have been to deny the premise, to say no. Changes in minimum wage, increases in minimum wage, or increasing gas prices simply aren't inflation to begin with. That's why that argument's wrong. What causes inflation is an increase in the money supply. What bothers me about this, I'm obviously agitated, also because I'm on steroids today. That never hurts. What bothers me about this is Chapter 12 is really clear about this. The chapter is really clear. And the PowerPoint is really clear. That slide says, the cause, singular, of inflation. And then underneath, the Friedman quote. So folks are not paying close enough attention to what you're reading or what you're looking at in the PowerPoint, or at least you're not able to see the application of it when I gave you an example that was designed to see whether you really understood it. So this is a good clue, especially with exam coming up in 2 weeks, that you probably need to spend a little bit more time and more focus on what's in the chapter and what's in this PowerPoint. When your book says, this is one of the most important truths in macroeconomics, you better underline or highlight or whatever it is you do that quote from Friedman, and it better stick as being sort of the overriding concern of that chapter. So again, like I said, this agitated. It also agitated me, by the way, because this is my area of expertise. I've written a whole bunch on inflation and the cost of inflation. So this strikes closer to home than some of the other talks that some of the topics that we've talked about. In any case, read carefully, pay attention to what's in the chapter, and sort of hopefully you understand the reasons why so many of you took the bait on this and what the problem was with doing so.